it's stomach turning. It's so fake. She hasn't done anything to justify this newfound love of her. You know, Lowry was making the point on the editors, like they all went to her because they were forced to when Biden imploded. She hasn't done anything to come to them to say, let me earn it. And these are the positions I have. And let me dazzle you, right? No, they're like, we're stuck with you. So we will love you. It's like a forced marriage where, you know, the bride is like, I'm going to try to focus on his gleaming white teeth instead of everything that's around it, right? Like they have to love her. But it is stomach turning to watch the media's sycophancy around this woman who we know they do not actually love.
Yeah, it's so amazing. This is the only way Kamala Harris could have gotten to the top of a presidential ticket. We all know that because we were all around 4 years ago when her campaign for president imploded before a single vote was cast.
Yeah, it's not like she was close.
And now we're all
it's not like she was lady in waiting
exactly
and she almost
right.
got there. It wasn't that. It wasn't like Hillary versus Barack. She was blown out. They had zero interest in her and her crazy far left positions, which she was running on as recently as 19.
Right, that's exactly right. Somebody on Twitter made a really funny joke. They said, I am tied with Vice President Kamala Harris for the number of votes she got for president in 2020, which is 0, right? And it's so amazing to see her sort of try to go back to kind of Democrat factory settings, right? Because in order to get ahead in that primary, she went far, far, far to the left. And now she's simply reversing every single one of those positions, which of course raises the question that you raised, Megyn, which is, okay, so what has she done to make her worthy of this coronation, right? Which I've been calling the ossification because, right, there's nothing there beyond just vibes, right? And it's so insulting to their voters. They show such contempt for them. This idea that they don't have to bring out a single piece of policy that she could say, this is my signature, this is what I represent. She only represents their conviction that Joe Biden could not beat Donald Trump. And it's so amazing to me that we're supposed to just buy this after the media lied about Joe Biden and then did this 180 on him, turning absolutely vicious, giving him the Trump treatment to get him off that stage. And now once again, this 180 on a woman who has really brought very little to this ticket and to this moment. It's a really, really amazing thing to see. And I think, you know, people keep saying, they keep trying to sell this on MSNBC, that this is kind of 2008 again, that, you know, this is the next, you know, Barack Obama. But I really do think it's ringing really, really hollow at this moment. We're past the kind of apex of the woke movement that tried to pass off this canard that Americans are divided based on race. We have just gotten past that as a society. I don't know if you saw this, but the liberal patriot Rui Teixeira's newsletter came out this morning with data from a new study that showed that the white wealth gap, meaning the wealth gap between rich white people and poor white people, is now bigger than the black-white wealth gap, okay? Everybody knows this. The real divide in America is along class lines. It's not along race lines. And so for her to come out the gate and say, what I'm bringing to the table is representation, what she represents is the elites, right? And I think that this is very, very clear to the American people right now.
So I know that you've been writing about this, but that is obviously her narrative and her background versus the background of JD Vance is one of the many reasons they find him so threatening and that he must be destroyed. There, you know, you had this Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, has been going off on JD Vance. We've been playing the sound bites. He's very threatened by him. And he's like, you know, he talks about his origin story. What's that? Normal human beings have a childhood. What's an origin story? As if that's not a common term that people talk about. Like, you know, my origin story is really like roots in Kentucky, moved to Middletown. That is something that people say. And the reason they're so triggered by it has in part to do with her privilege. She cannot run on white privilege in this race, not just because of her own background, but also because of JD's.
I think that's exactly right. She has the kind of background that really predicts for upward mobility. Her mother has a PhD. They valued education very much at home. Her bio, her official bio on the White House talks about her loving extended family. And these are all of the things that predict for upward mobility in America today, whereas JD comes out of this broken situation, these broken, destroyed communities in the Rust Belt, which were destroyed by Democratic policies like, NAFTA, opening the border, defunding vocational training in schools, thank you, Presidents Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. And that's where he comes out of. JD Vance is a survivor of domestic violence. There are so many people who look to that thing that he survived, who are experiencing that right now and seeing that representation and thinking, wow, it can really get better. And that moment at the RNC where he pointed to his mom, who's been clean for 10 years after struggling with heroin, and President Trump stood up for her and joined that tearful standing ovation. Do you know how many people in America were looking at that and thinking, wow, we were forgotten and we were left behind and nobody cared about us. And they tried to hide it with all of this racial language to divide us. And look at what can be if we don't give up on ourselves, because that ticket has not given up on us. That really is what the choice of JD Vance represented. I think it was so clever of the Trump campaign to really go in that direction. And it's such a contrast with Kamala Harris. And again, really exposing the ways in which the leftist elites use the language around race as a smokescreen to hide the ways in which they have benefited from the class divide, and the communities that JD Vance comes from have really paid the price.
Oh my gosh, that's so well said, Batya. She's literally written a book on this. It's called Second Class. You can see it over her right shoulder on the screen. Well worth your time. But that moment at the convention really was meaningful to me because you could see his mom, Beverly, has lived a rough life. She wasn't all dolled up. I mean, she looked lovely. I'm just saying that she wasn't like a perfectly coiffed Michelle Obama type, like, oh, look at me. And they put her out there. There was a moment between the two of them. And what was meaningful about it to me was it's not a great relationship. Like JD's been pretty open about the fact that he was an abused child in many ways. It's not that she was hitting him. It's that she scared him to within an inch of his life. She put him in that car. She drove at excessive speeds and said she was going to kill them both. That's abuse. This family strong-armed him into not testifying against her with the truth. When she then got charged criminally, she was actively addicted to drugs and then eventually heroin. She was bringing man after man into her home with young children, including a little boy, JD. He was having Pepsi in the baby bottle. He was sleeping in the jeans. He didn't have somebody really looking after him other than when his grandma came into the picture more full-time, Mama. And she helped JD. And his mom stuck around and she helped him with some homework and things like he writes about it all in Hillbilly Elegy. It's not that he loathes his mom, but I can speak to this personally. When you've got someone in your family who's got a rampaging drug addiction, it ruins them. And it can ruin your relationship and it can ruin your family, at least temporarily. And those scars may not fully ever heal. And so it was actually really damn brave for them to put her out there. And JD didn't try to say like, we're all good, talking about her. There was a reference in the speech that kind of suggested she's here and, it's complicated. And that's terrifying to them because what do, Batya? They look at JD and Trump and their followers and they see deplorables. They see bitter clingers. They see fat losers who are on drugs. And they mock them. Like behind closed doors with their Harvard degrees, they would have nothing to do with these people. Nothing. But they know they need some of them to vote for them, right? So they're placed in this impossible position. So they've got to run to their base, women who love abortion, to say, he's the devil and he hates you.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I've had a very similar thought when members of JD's family came up on the stage at the RNC, and a lot of them had tattoos and other things that you don't usually see on display in the sort of hallowed grounds of the American elites.
Yeah.
And it was just incredibly powerful to say, you guys matter. You guys have a seat at the table. And you're so right, Megyn, about how JD spoke to his mom. That implied forgiveness, that
Right.
implied grace, if you will, right? Which I'm sure is very tied to his conversion to Catholicism, which seems to have had a really deep impact on how he sees the world and on how he sees the community that he comes from, all of its problems and so forth. I totally agree with you. I think that is really, really dangerous to them. I will say, there's nothing wrong with apologizing for comments that you may have made when you were kind of, less prominent about, women
Here's
with
why
no
he can't.
children.
But I'll tell you why he can't, because he said him so many times. The childless cat lady phrase, not so much, but the underlying point, he believes. It's not that childless people are bad. I don't think he believes that. But he really believes that there is a need to fight in defense of the choice to procreate. Like, he feels like that is under attack by a section of the left that thinks there's some sort of shame in bringing children into this fragile world mostly for environmental reasons. There may be shame attached to actually doing it, and that the good thing to do would be not to if you really care about the world and those imagined children, because what are you setting them up for? And he's been attacked by them. And so if you go back and look at when he was making these comments, many times he references himself being under attack by these people. And it's because he's getting tired of listening to them tell people that it's irresponsible to have children. And so you can see a guy in a defensive posture, saying kind of F off. The future of the country and the world depends on people having children. And these childless cat ladies can STFU. That's the MK version of it.
Yeah, I totally hear all of that. My counterpoint would just be the GOP is in its big tent era, it's broadening its doors. There are masses and masses of people who would never have considered becoming Republicans before, who now are really considering it. And I think that the posture of the Trump campaign should be, we're not willing to sacrifice a single one, even if they are misunderstanding us. And I would urge people, that's why I think it's really important not to sort of refer to Kamala Harris as a DEI candidate, DEI hire. What if there's one person, one Black man who for the first time was going to vote for a Republican and is not paying such close attention, right? He's busy trying to feed his family in Joe Biden's economy, which is very difficult, right? Paying attention with half an ear, and it rings hot, oh, I know what they mean by that, Why sacrifice even one of those people? We have a country to save, right? I think that should be sort of the posture. And I think that there are a lot of people who traditionally would have been on the other side of some of these culture war debates, who for the real economic reasons that Trump is bringing to the table, the really incredible economic agenda to bring back the middle class that the Democrats don't have, right? That is such a winning argument.
In these crazy times, there's peace of mind in security. Security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. But think about this. You're not financially secure if all of your eggs are in one financial basket. Gold and silver can be an amazing way to diversify your savings as a hedge against inflation. They are a physical asset that's in high demand globally. And through Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Yes, you can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. Just text MK to 989898 and receive a free, no obligation info kit and learn the role precious metals could play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text MK to 989898. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands and thousands of happy customers. Text MK to 989898. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.